Okay. Sorry, guys. I'm smart. I started my demo on my regular page. I didn't pay attention. So, we're going to start over. Sorry about all that. Alright. So now that we're just around 30 minutes into the time, I'm going to start over, start fresh, and we're going to do this right. Tim noticed that I was streaming on my personal page, and now I'm on Clay Buddies. quick face shot. It's kind of weird not seeing Hey Denise, not knowing who you're actually watching. I'm another fellow Harry Potter. Alright, so let's do this right. So, we are going to be working on the cylinder, and specifically improvements, little tips and tricks that I've found that have helped me kind of get better along the way. The search for continually bettering myself as a potter is going to be ever-ending. I don't feel that whether you're a beginner or you've been doing this for 30 years, you've figured out everything that makes you the perfect potter. And so perfection is something that we want to search for and maybe just know that we're never going to fully achieve. And that's kind of what I've set my goal to be, is to just continually improve no matter what I do on the potter's wheel. So a few things that I have that have helped me kind of start this whole process is to make sure that I'm set up completely. Is my stool where it needs to be? Creating this consistency of how the experience feels is going to be a lot more important than just repeating a form. If I'm repeating the form and there's some things that I'm doing that are preventing me from bettering myself, then I need to kind of reevaluate what I'm trying to achieve and then create that form once again. So one of the things that I like are the smaller fitted bat systems. This is the Amico system, and so it's got the standard holes, and then we also have just the smaller bat where the smaller bat bins are placed for my 7.5 roughly bat that I'm going to be using. Creating consistency is, I feel, the thing that allows us to grow exponentially, and it's going to help us. It's going to help us kind of get in the mindset of what's important, on what we're trying to achieve and what's important. Comfortability is everything. I want my students and myself, obviously, as potters, to sit and be comfortable with the things that we're creating. And so when I'm replicating, I'm really analyzing the things that are making that pot work and the things that are making those pots not work. If I, like as I said, if I am not paying attention to those things, then it's gonna, I feel, hinder me, and it's going to prevent me from creating the way that I need to, or the kind of shoot toward the goals that I'm trying to achieve. So weighing out my clay is very important. So having your scale, I'm going to weigh out enough for me to make a tumbler right now. And I know that when I throw a tumbler, that I'm going to be throwing a 1.5 pounds of clay roughly. And that's the first thing that I'm doing to start this consistency. When I have my clay weighed out, it allows me to know what I can do with that specific ball of clay. Sorry about that, got you guys seasick. And when I start for the day, and I know I'm going to be making cups, I'm going to take 5 to 10 pounds of clay, I'm going to wedge it until I feel that the consistency is where it needs to be. And for me, that's anywhere from 50 to 100 times. So depending on how the clay is responding, how wet is it out of the bag, how dry is it out of the bag. So those are the things that are going to allow me to feel comfortable with however many times I've wedged it. This is fairly wet, so kind of over wedged it. Alright, so I'm going to start with that center. We're going to go through step by step on this. Sorry about my nice loud Pacifica wheel. You don't have to, when you're centering, just peg out your pedal. Get it to a place that allows that clay to really just respond to your touch. I'm replicating not only the piece, but I'm replicating how fast the wheel's spinning. I'm replicating where my elbow's tucked into my body. I'm replicating, I'm trying to ignore how it looks. So looking away from the, hello everybody, looking away from the piece allows me to feel it rather than have my eyes kind of discourage what's actually going on the wheel. As I dive, I want to find myself a nice 45-ish degree angle. I'm going to let my fingers naturally find the center of the clay. And as soon as I find that, I'm gonna drop that angle down just slightly, and I'm gonna dive straight toward the center of the wheel. Don't hesitate. Everything that we do on the wheel is going to be very deliberate, and so we want to make sure that as we're pushing the clay, that we're confident in the movement that we're making. Check everything. Take your needle tool, check your depth. Do a depth that's going to be comfortable for how you like to trim. I tell all my students start with around 1/2 inch. And no, they didn't change the schedule. I messed up. I didn't pay attention when I pressed live, and I switched back over to my personal page. And so I've only got roughly 30 minutes, so we will do what we can in that 30-minute time frame. So I apologize, guys. So checking your depth and consistently making sure that that depth is how you like it to be every time you flip that pot upside down and trim it. I prefer not to trim as many pieces as possible, just because of being as a professional potter. I want to move these pieces as quickly as I can throughout the process. And so the thinner, that's one less step that I have to create. Now, I will say that I have started trimming certain pieces. My cups now, I felt that they were lacking, and it just felt too flat on the piece. Oh, well then, there we go, Tim. Thank you. I appreciate that. I guess I'm still thrown off by the whole time change thing as well, or how we're exploring this. And so I decided, and I'll show you some of these pieces here shortly. I've decided that, you know, I needed some more interest, so I use a wiggle wire for the majority of my piece. I'll talk about why I decided to start using the wiggle wire, and it wasn't only just to put a nice pretty design on the bottom of the pot. It was a lot more than that. So I've had to adjust a few things. Instead of having the bottoms of my cups, my tumblers, and my mugs, for instance, be at 1/8 inch, I've jumped up to just over 1/4 inch, and that allows me to get the depth that I need for the decoration that I put on the bottom of the piece. So, and after go back to the pot now, after I've opened up, found that nice roughly 45 degree angle, and I've drawn that clay out, or I've dove down, then I'm going to take and I'm going to kind of crook my fingers so I can then pull that clay toward my body, and I want to kind of mimic more of of what the wall is going to start to look like. So, yeah, time zones are hard. I get you, Denise. And so I'm already setting in my mind what I'm going to be creating. We're focusing on the cylinder, and the importance of that cylinder, of moving that clay straight up is what we're really shooting for. So I'm letting myself know ahead of time, by telling myself first I'm making a cylinder, and then establishing the base of the pot, making the cylinder. When I do flatten out and establish that base, I've got this idea with the clay that how the particles, which I'm sure tons of potters think in this matter, but how the particles are being pushed and pulled, all the platelets, they're being pulled out and away from the center. I want to push that clay back in. With clay, the things that cause things like S-cracks are the amount of water that sits in the bottom, oversaturating the clay. And so I'm trying to prevent from doing that, and so every chance I get, I'm wiping this water out of the pot. Alright, when I switch over, it's really about this nice, deep well that we create under the pot. That's going to translate into the height. And so it's going to give me my first pull. Once again, nice deliberate movements. I'm using my sponge. I just love the way that it distributes the pressure. And I'm just going to slowly pull that clay up and in. Yep. Ha-ha! It's one thing I tell my students. I hope I screw up. When I'm teaching, I want my students to watch me screw up. So for my students who haven't seen me screw up yet, there you go. So up and in. I'm focusing on moving kind of this idea of this isosceles triangle. And this isosceles triangle is invisible past the rim of the pot, obviously. But I want my hands to move in that direction. So I'm going to slowly pull and draw that clay up and toward the center. And that allows me to get the height that I need out of my pot. Nice dig underneath the bottom. I'm pushing really firmly down toward the top of the wheel head. I'm pulling that clay up and in. Yes, I'm flipped. So I am. I might have missed that question. I'm a right-handed potter, and because of being able to see the screen, no, things didn't change. I think we're kind of confusing. You start when you're supposed to start, Mariana. I hope I said that right. I started on my personal Facebook page, and then I realized, because Tim said, "Hey, I don't think you're on the Clay Buddy site," so I will hop off then. And maybe I'll get lucky enough to do another live stream at another time. I'll cut this one in half when I'm done. It's not even that it's thin. And it depends on where you are in your pottery career too. So thin is relative. What is the purpose of the purpose of the form? How functional is it? Is it going outside? All those things. You're not the dumb one, Tim. I think I made this a total bust by starting on my other page. I'll take the dumb one this time, Tim. You can take it next time. And then somebody said, can't see your handiwork. Maybe camera angle from the other side is better. I did think about that. The problem is I've got this big cabinet here, and so maybe I should have pulled my wheel out. I think this is that kind of problem with starting on the wrong page and not being on the right one. So let me go ahead and stop this and cut this, and then we'll move up to the next size. Don't be afraid to cut your pieces in half. I think that I am dumb MVP. if you have that confidence that it's just clay, then we have a little bit more confidence that we can do it. And if you've done it once, then you can totally do it again. So there's this. I'll pull it up so we can look at it closer in the mirror, or in the video. I've got this weird little bump. This little bump on there. I just kind of womp womp. And I always cut, when I'm cutting pieces in half, I'm always pulling into the pot. Let me just back up. So into the pot, I'm not cutting all the way underneath because I want this portion to stay on my bat. I'm going to cut underneath, and then I'm going to pull straight up, and that allows me to get a true profile of what the foot looks like, how much the clay thickness I have there, and then how my taper looks from bottom to top. Oh, thank you, Sue. I still want to take Tim's dumb MVP away from him. At least for now. I'll let him have it later. Alright, so we're going to move that off to the side. I'm going to change bats. I only like to throw my cups on the smaller bats. I've got these square bats. That was another thing. So from point to point, obviously, is long enough, is wide enough for us to put on our wheel heads. These square bats are nice masonite. So apply a little bit of water when you're working with masonite. This helps that adhesion, the suction, a little bit better. And we're going to go to 3-pound ball. So once again, depending on how dry or wet my clay is will determine how many times I wedge. This in particular is fairly soft. I grabbed a newer bag of clay. I like my clay to age a little bit longer. This is probably about a month from when I purchased it. Typically, I go and buy clay 500 pounds at a time. And yes, I've got some pieces. And I'll show you what I do with the bottoms of my pieces. Going back to the aging the clay, I found something that was just kind of a quick, sweet spot for me. And I like the clay to be a little bit firmer. B-Mix is a finicky clay. We've got, it's kind of that 50-50 split of people who love B-Mix and people who hate it. I'm obsessed with it. Yeah, live anything can happen. You're right, Denise. MVP of wedging, negative. Thank you, though. The thing about wedging is you have to create that consistency to allow you to feel confident. If I were to take that ball of clay out of the bag, slam it, pat it into a ball, slam it on the wheel, I don't know 100% what to expect. I'm trying to create expectancy. We can't expect anything in pots, but what I control the feeling. Does it feel right? If it doesn't, what adjustments do I have to make? And the only way that we're going to know that is constantly adjusting what we do. Trying to better ourselves, throwing multiple pots. That idea of repetition helps us so strongly, and it allows us to just create something that feels very true to us. And so one of the things that I've really adopted into how I work in my studio is during college, my instructor had us pull we had an assignment to make 30 cups. They all had to be a specific height. They all had to be different. Cone 5 B-Mix. Thank you, Jeannie. Oh, thanks, Corey. And so for every cup we made had to be 6 inches tall. It was a beginning clay class. We started with 2 pounds per cup, 6 inches tall. Each of them had to be different, and then everyone had to have a handle, and those handles had to kind of be different. So it was challenging us to think about how can we use what we're learning and change what we're doing. So we're constantly changing things on the fly. After this project was done, so for every cup we made, we had to pull 5 handles. So that's that bulk amount of information that we need to understand what it takes to pull a good handle. So after we made each of these cups, And after I finally kind of tallied up everything that I had made, I was in roughly the 50 to 60 range of how many pieces that I had made. A lot of those pieces were horrible. And it was, one, because I was fairly new to clay, but two, because I didn't understand what I was trying to accomplish with the clay. I need to know what I'm capable of in order to create that 6-inch cup, and how many pounds of clay does it take for me to get to that 12-inch pot. When I create this repetition, it's not only repetition in throwing the piece, it's repetition in my mind, it's repetition in my practice, and crossing my T's and dotting my I's on the regular. And so what I'm trying to accomplish, like I said earlier, is that feeling not opposed to, but in conjunction with making that pot over and over and over. So moving that clay with vertical forms, and I'll explain why I decided, we got about 10-ish minutes. I'll just explain here after I'm done with this guy, or while I'm working on this guy, why I decided cylinders are so important. I went on this journey of just wanting a nice cylindrical cup. I just apply rocket ship motif to the surface of the piece. And so I wanted something that was nice and vertical, that felt like when I make this rocket look like it's taking off, that it's got a lot of space, pun intended, to move through. I wanted to have options of putting that specific design in a certain area, and where on the cup could I put it, and what would it look like. If the cup was too short, I felt that it wouldn't achieve the proper visual element that I was looking for. And so I sat down and I started weighing my clay out like crazy, and I didn't know at the time what exactly I was looking for. I had a shape in mind. I knew that I wanted it to hold roughly 20 ounces. I wanted it to be a pint cup at least, and so that's where I kind of developed that if I can make this piece over and over, that I could, refer to it as my pint glass. And so I sat down and I started, and over a course of 2 years, I kind of went back and roughly tallied up that when I finally was happy with the shape that I had found, that I had made roughly 2,000 pieces. And this was in between making other pots and teaching, and I'm a dad, so I've got family life, and so it was just understanding that journey and what it took to get me there, and then replicating. When I found out that piece was the piece that I liked, replicating it, and not only, like I said, replicating the piece, but the feeling. Knowing what it took for me to move the clay in that same way. And so when I sit down, I throw a minimum of 20 cups, and that's because I need to get in rhythm. I need to recreate that feeling every time I sit down to throw. And I want when I sit down to know that I'm throwing 20 cups, and I get 20 cups, and it wasn't 25, and 5 of them flopped. I want to throw 20 cups and be done with 20 cups. And that might be the warm-up or whatever, and then I'll throw, some platters and some taller vases. We'll cut this guy in half too. So I think the biggest thing I can stress is we always hear, keep going, keep practicing, keep doing, do it again. And that is as important as it gets. But it's about recreating how comfortable you are on the potter's wheel. It's about recreating, your process. And when you watch other potters work, I think the infatuation is seeing that consistency. That's something that we can develop and have control over, is consistency. But we have to create. I think I'm gonna do one more pull on this guy. I'm getting lost in the discussion and the element of what I'm trying to accomplish. So with that, we hear potters say, "Oh, well, I pull in 3 pulls." Give yourself those goals that might seem out of touch. When I make a cup, I mean 3 to 5 pulls. 5 is a lot for me sometimes on a cup. But do what's comfortable for you. Don't feel that the pot has to be made because the person next to you can do it in less pulls more efficiently. What is their background? How do they learn? Just because, let's say you guys walked into the studio at the same time and both have never touched clay, and they pick it up faster than you, it doesn't mean anything. That just means that they figured something out that you just quite weren't ready to understand yet. And when our minds are ready to understand these things, that's when we get those aha moments. That's when it allows us to then replicate what that thought is and put it into a pot. We're not trying. Don't ever compare yourself to the person next.